I started the page with just talking about what is Hinduism and the things that I've learned orally. I didn't do research, but when I started doing research, my page just went a whole other way because I started discovering so many, I would say probably controversial, but a lot of things that, were hidden or that is not openly spoken about. And so my page addresses being what it really means being Tamil. Well, everybody defines being Tamil differently, so I'm going to rephrase that. But about ancient Tamils and how we've actually evolved as a society and our practices then.
You don't know who I am. If I ring up a few numbers, an entire village would stand there for me. Whoa, 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 don't be scared. We would often hear people say these words when they are to show their strength to people. Probably that's the importance of having a family, friends, and people who stand by you. We take pride to show off to people and at times even to initiate a discussion about the places and people we belong to. We take pride in our lineage. We like to talk about it. We also like to show off that what our great grandfathers did and what heritage they've passed on to us. But how sure are we about the tradition, the culture, the practices, and its origin that we've been sticking to? Welcome to the Wominspiria podcast. This is Revati here, your host, a person seeking inspiration and hope at every door possible. Today, I have Supanki Kalanadhan, a lawyer by profession and a history researcher by passion. She runs an Instagram page called What the Puttu. So let's go ahead and talk to her and know about our Tamil culture and tradition and the roots of it.
So, hello and welcome to the Wominspiria podcast. This podcast is all about bringing in inspiration to people, along with letting you know that there are many other fields and many other ways to get an inspiration, and also letting you know that there are various fields to explore and get to know that you can't sit idle at home and there is only one life which you can enjoy. So, in that course, today I've got Supanki Kalanadhan, who's a lawyer by profession, and she's doing research about our history, about our lineage. So there are many times that we keep discussing with people, and also there is never a time when we don't bring in about our lineage, about a tradition. We never miss to talk about the history and let people know that where we came from, right? And how sure are we about the authenticity of the information that we have been sharing with people about our lineage? So let's check with Supanki about the same. Hello and welcome to the podcast, Supanki. Thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you, Revati. I'm so excited and thank you for the great introduction.
Lovely, Supanki. So it's great to see you starting the day with my interview. Thank you for that, considering the time.
No, thank you. Thank you for inviting me on.
All right. Supanki, when I start the interview, I always have this small ice-breaking question. So when you start your day, what are the two affirmations that you say to your mirror every morning?
I hope today goes well. And I just tell myself to just breathe in. And that's something I tell my son. I want to get into yoga. I have to be honest. I'm not fully into it. But one of the things that I always do, because I know every day there will be little stresses that come and go. And I've been trying to teach my son when he's afraid to breathe in. So that's something that I actually have written on my mirror, actually, like a post note saying just breathe in.
Yes. At times we need to breathe in. That's what we forget to do. To just take a time for ourselves and understand that going slow is fine.
Exactly. A lot of the times I tell myself to slow down now instead of, keep going and to enjoy what I'm doing and enjoy the moment. And I think that's also very important to acknowledge that no matter how much you try, you just can't get everything done on your list. And you got to, breathe in.
Yes. So it's not like a rat race, but realizing that you need to go in your own pace. I would say it's like opening the Pandora's box.
Exactly.
So yes. So I let people know that you're a lawyer and you're a researcher, history researcher by passion. So tell
Mhm.
us, let our people know, let our listeners know that who Supanki is.
Yeah, as you said, by profession, I'm a lawyer. Um, Going back to my childhood, so we came from Ulam when I was really young to Canada because of the war. And when we came to Canada, my parents were so certain that they were going to go back home soon. And this was like almost 30 years ago. And so they put me in Tamil classes, they put me in all these extracurricular activities, dance, music, drama. So I did everything. So while I was I grew up very artistic, very creative. And that, my personal journey and my personal background made me question about, human rights and equality and why we had to flee our country. So all of that made me realize, oh, I want to pursue something in human rights. And I thought, law would be a great avenue for that. So I went and I did law and human rights at the University of Essex in the UK. And then I came back to Canada and I did like a lot of internships in human rights. I was actually in India for 2 months with an organization working with sex workers and HIV children and doing projects that create awareness about the issues that they face. So all of that stuff led me to law, and at the moment I'm currently working with the government of Canada, the federal government. So I'm a government lawyer by profession. Wow. So that's my one of my passions, and I love what I do, and I mean, I question sometimes some of the things I do and whether what my future holds. But at the moment, I'm loving what I do as my profession. But equally, I'm also very passionate about Tamil history, who I am, some of the things that we do, and I think growing up in the diaspora, it's even more important. And sometimes I went through this, and a lot of people my age, now I'm in my 30s, but when we grew up, we were at some points like embarrassed of our culture because our parents would ask us to, wear, for example, the puttu. My mom made me wear the puttu when I was younger. And when I was walking out, I would actually take it out and then go to school because I was so embarrassed.
Yes.
So I would do like things like that because I was so embarrassed because I didn't know why we do things. But as I grew, I started really loving our culture as I started learning about it. And because my parents really put me in Tamil classes and drama, I was able to understand the history. But I wanted to dive deep. So just out of passion, I just started researching into that. And especially, I grew up in a very religious home. And I was really into Hinduism and what that is all about and the interconnection of being Tamil and being Hindu. So I started a page called What the Put, and this was after I had my son. And as you know, like women, after we have a child, we go through this phase a lot. Some of us go through this phase, and I certainly did, where I was questioning, my abilities, being a good mom, whether I can be a good mom. I faced a lot of things that, for example, I faced issues with breastfeeding that, is not very, like, not really openly spoken about in the community. So I felt really bad about myself. And then when I went back to my career, I felt like I had to start all over again. And so it was a lot of things. And I just wanted to do something creative. So I thought, so my brother, my sister-in-law, my friends, my husband, they just all encouraged me to kind of start a page called What the Puttu. And because I started wearing the puttu again after marriage, so I thought, okay, what is that? What is it about? What is our culture about? What is our religious practices about? So that's how I started the page. I started the page with just talking about what is Hinduism and the things that I've learned orally. I didn't do research, but when I started doing research, my page just went a whole other way because I started discovering so many, I would say probably controversial, but a lot of things that, were hidden or that is not openly spoken about. And so my page addresses being what it really means being Tamil. Well, everybody defines being Tamil differently, so I'm going to rephrase that. But about ancient Tamils and how we've actually evolved as a society and our practices then.
Right. So when you were telling me that you were ashamed of wearing a puttu while going to school, so this is the identity of every child, I would say. So even in India, we do have the same issue. When you become a parent, you realize about your tradition, you realize the importance of your lineage. And that's what has happened with us as well, I would say, Supanki. So once you had your child, you understood like, okay, this is what I need to pass on to my son. My son needs to understand about my tradition.
When I was younger, my mom sent me to like all these religious classes. So I would go to religion class where I would learn the Vedams and everything. And so from that, I kind of just learned like that. And I actually taught at a Hindu temple, like Devadams and stories and all of that. So I was a Hindu teacher. This was 15 years ago. I did that before I went to law school. So I had that background. And during my wedding is actually, which was 9 years ago, is when I actually started looking into like, why are we doing these rituals? And even then I didn't do completely my research. I went and spoke to a priest that I was really close to and got his interpretation, and we decided to do the mandrams. Even then I questioned, why do we do mandrams in Sanskrit? Why aren't we doing it in Tamil? So my priest, he was wonderful, he did it in Tamil, and we did Thevarams instead of Sanskrit mantras, and he did everything in Tamil, and that was great for me at that time. So after that wedding, my friend and also another wedding planner, he also asked me, because I had somebody at my wedding explain what the priest was saying in Tamil and English. So he said, that's such a great method. Like, would you be able to do it for my wedding? My friend asked me that. So I sat beside the priest and I explained it in English and Tamil, in English actually. And then after the wedding planner, I would explain it in English and Tamil. So this was, again, I didn't do, my personal research. I was just kind of going off what others did. And then at that point, I said, like we do this, like, in Hinduism, they say we do this for this, this for this. So I would talk about it. And my family was like, okay, why don't you just start a page about it? That would help so many. And then when I started, I was actually on vacation, and I was in Dominican, and I was just sitting there, and I was also like, I was going through that phase when I wasn't feeling so good about myself. And then my brother sent me another page that he came across saying, hey, look, this page actually talks about Hindu rituals and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, this is good. But I have a different interpretation. And he's like, yeah, that's why it's great if people have different interpretations. Start the page, stop talking about it. So then I came back from vacation, my brother, my husband, my sister, like we all sat down and we kind of started developing the page together. And then we came up with the name What the Putta, and then we started doing it. So like I had no really intention or anything. I mean, obviously I wanted to spread awareness, but people asked me, where do you intend to take this page? And I didn't know where I wanted to take the page at that time. I just said, I just love doing research. I love reading, and I love sharing knowledge. So I just kind of started doing the page that way.
You saw another page which was talking about Hindu rituals, right? And you started one. You said that this is a different version. Every person, and I've seen a lot of pages talking about Hindu rituals. Why should we do some certain things and why shouldn't we do certain things? Each person has his own theory. How do we confirm the authenticity of the same, and how sure are you about your research? This might sound a little bit of kind of a tricky question, but yes, how confident are you about the same?
I think the key is a lot of us, including myself, as I said, prior to doing the page, I was still talking about like Hindu rituals from what I've orally heard, what I was orally taught. And I think the key is to do research on your own about all the different types of interpretations of a particular thing, right? Particular topic. And I think that's what really, gets you to give people the most accurate information that you possibly can. But I always tell my readers that this is my interpretation based on my research. And, being a lawyer, like, that's what I was trained in.
Yes.
There's always two sides to an argument. But what is your story? What is your argument? But I can't just go to in front of a judge and just say, hey, this is what I think. Here you go. Here's my,
Yes.
this is, I think this is great. I can't say that. I have to put in the evidence in front and say, this is the best argument forward. And I think I do that the exact same method. That being, I think my legal training helps me in my research, because that's what I do. I look at all of this and I say, based on my research, yes. And sometimes when it's like, when I feel like, oh, it could be this, but it could be that, I put that in too. I say, some say this, but other scholars say this. What do you think? So I always do that too, because I, but some things I feel super strong about. And I say, this is my interpretation. This is what I think. I'm sure this is what happened according to me. And that's why it's a blog, right? Like it's more of a blog. And it's my interpretation. But I do a lot of academic research. I try to look at, and it's also tricky because the academic research by, non-Tamils is sometimes very different from the ones that are by Tamils. So I try to do like as complete research as possible. That's why I don't regularly post on my page, because it takes a long time before I'm able to put a post. But so I think research is key. Like, and I think that is what's scary about social media, because everybody can post anything. It's not like academic articles, right? Like you can just post anything. But I think doing the most research, and when people have questions, you're able to give them, whatever answers with the right research. I think that's key.
Right. At the end of the day, it's all about self-satisfaction. How satisfied are you about a particular thing? So that is what, yes, it is your interpretation of certain things that you're delivering it to people through your blog posts. Yes.
Yeah.
Women should not touch things during the periods time of the month. Is it a myth or is it scientific?
So I would say, so I think recently there's been a lot of, I guess, posts and a lot of things that we read and what we hear that, like, for example, menstruation, all of that is scientific. When we go to the temple, it's because the idol goes upwards or downwards, all of that. But for my research, I think for your viewers, what I want to say is, for me, Hinduism and ancient Tamil religious practices are completely separate. And eventually, Hinduism is from a Vedic tradition, and Tamils did not historically practice that. Eventually, the Vedic traditions were merged with ancient Tamil traditions. So, for example, the menstruation, I know I see all these scientific reasons behind it, but it's a very complicated Tamil concept that we had. It's called Ananga, where women were seen as being possessed with these powers. That's called Ananga. So, and we have to think practically. This is a society that goes back, thousands and thousands of years, where population growth fertility was a very important concept.
Yes.
So, like, they didn't understand how a woman was able to produce babies. Like, so she was, seen as a goddess in a way, because she was a mystery. And they knew, and they were able to connect the menstrual blood with, producing a baby. So that blood was seen as something that's very powerful. So there's some interpretation that they've seen that power, the menstrual blood, as a sacred power. And some scholars say, yeah, but it was seen as a sacred, dangerous power. So during that time, women were seen as, you had to contain this power in a way, because it may be so dangerous when you get out of the house, because women possess this power. So that's why they were told to like seclude and sit in a separate hut for an X number of days, especially during her first period. So all of that, it goes back to when we think about what is society. Oh yes, fertility was a big part of celebration, and that's why it was celebrated, because it was seen as like a key part of society at that time, right? And I want to emphasize that at that time. Now, obviously, society has evolved, but some practices we refuse to change it, because we wanted to carry it on. But I think going back to thinking about, okay, like why, and it's not, I wouldn't say it's, I mean, it is scientific or biological by means, but some of the things I read on why, and I don't, like, from my research, I think it's because Tamils had this concept. And even in Kerala today, which, at one point we were all called Tamilaham, Kerala and Tamil Nadu. So even to this day, we have indigenous goddesses there where they menstruate every month. And then even the menstrual cloth is seen as so auspicious. So because it's seen as auspicious, I don't think we were ever seen as dirty. According to ancient Tamil traditions, I don't think it was seen as like this dirty thing that you can't touch or you can't. But because it was seen as, they were just wowed by the process, really. And they said, oh, like, okay, you have this power, so we need to contain it. So that's why they separated it. And I'm not going into whether that's right or wrong, but I think going back, that from my research, my interpretation is it came from that. And not other. I'm not big on the mythological stories. For me, I see this as something that makes more sense to me.
Yes. That sounded like yes, I have heard a lot of versions about menstruation and why women were asked to be separate and secluded during those days of the month. But your explanation was like it was entirely a different dimension where women were respected. You said that the Hindu tradition and the Tamil tradition, they are entirely different. Would you like to enlighten us a little bit more about the same? Because I would frankly say that's news to me. And I've been reading Tamil tradition is what Hinduism is all about. So I never saw them separate.
Yeah, so that was news to me too when I started doing research. But through my interpretation, through my research, what I've understood is that, ancient Tamils had their own religious practices. One of them being, the 5 regions that you might know as, Kurinji, Mullai, Nedal. Yeah. Yes. So we had our own gods per region. But over time, what happened is, what we know is as Hinduism today is actually, according to my research, it's really a combination of so many different indigenous practices all over India is what we know is Hinduism today. So what happened is we had the Vedic tradition, which is separate from the Tamil tradition. Over time, they migrated with the Tamils, and they kind of, try to preach their Vedic principles. But what happened is it's a process called Sanskritization, where they would take a Vedic god and merge it with the indigenous god that we had, and then say that, it's the same god. So this is quite confusing, very complicated. I think it could be something on its own, a podcast on its own. But I'll give you a very simple example. So we have, everybody knows the god Murugan today, right? Skanda. But Skanda, the origins of Skanda in the Tamil tradition is, in Kurinji, where it was the land of the mountains. We would have heard of, there was Valli is like a popular, his wife. Yes. So in Kurinji, they actually had a god called Seon. who is
Okay.
actually seen as one of the ancestors. So Seon would have had the Ved.
David Puri. Yeah.
He was a hunter, and he had his love interest, who was Valli, and who was his wife. So the Vedic tradition comes in, sees that, okay, these people are praying to this god, this hunter god called, a Seon. And then they look at their list of gods that they have, and they have a warrior god called Skanda. So they combine Skanda with Seon and say, hey, Seon and Skanda are the same gods, but hey, you have a low caste wife who's Valli, who's from the tribes, but so we need to upgrade him with a wife, and it's also love marriage, so we're not into love marriages. So we're gonna give you a high caste wife, Devane, who's Skanda's wife. We're gonna put her and say, hey, she is his first wife, and then there's Valli, who's your second wife. So that's what historically, and I was, because I always wondered, why do our gods have two wives? Like, why? Because on one end, I always hear, oh, Tamil was about Urtana Korti, all of that. And then I hear this. So I was like, okay, then why? So what happened? Like, when did this happen? And then I realized, oh, okay. So this was historically, maybe this has happened. And Sanskritization, if you read on different academic articles, it talks about this, this process, that this is what's happened. But it's been many, many years that it's really hard to understand that, because now we're so merged with this, right? But I think it's still important to know our background and some of the things that's happened. So I'm not, I don't tell my readers or viewers, don't go to the temple, don't do this, don't do that. It's completely anybody can do whatever they want, but I think it's still important to know. And one of the things that I focus on my page is some of the questions I had. If I just go on my page and just talk about Sanskritization, or if I just go on my page and say, hey, Tamils, we've been there for 3,000 years at least. Come on, read my page. Nobody will care. Nobody will care. But if I say, hey, do you know why we do this for a wedding? Do you know how weddings were conducted?
Right.
Then people are interested, because that's part of their daily lives. Everybody's interested in weddings. So now I started looking into weddings, and now I conduct my own weddings based on my research of how an ancient Tamil wedding could have potentially looked like, and different things. And I always say this is not exactly how the wedding looked like, but it's more like a celebration of the different traditions that they had. So instead of Sanskrit mandrams, or even just transforming it into Tamil mandrams, I use ancient Tamil literature scripts, so Tolkappiyam, or I use Tirukkural, or I use Kurundogai. I use from ancient Tamil literature, I use little parts of it that talks about weddings. And I, instead of a fire, I don't have a fire, because Tamils never had a fire. That was Vedic tradition. Instead, I have a frame of the regions, and I also have we used to worship our ancestors. We used to erect stones for them to celebrate and pray to them. So I would have a stone. So I do weddings now that kind of discuss these things. And I have people who people here, young Tamils who don't know how to speak Tamil themselves, but who are very interested in the culture. They'll come up to me and they'll ask me, oh, what is Tolkappiyam? Right? And even adults don't know what Tolkappiyam is. And so we'll have a full out discussion about ancient Tamil history, about these different practices, which I find has been more effective than me just posting. What Tamils have been if I go and tell my son, he's only 4 now, but if I go and tell him, you should be proud to be Tamil. And that's what some of our parents did, right? And we felt suffocated. We didn't care. But if I went and I said, oh, the wedding you see, and when it's time to get married, people always want to know why,
Hmm.
right?
Yes.
So when we talk about it, then it gets interesting, and then people become fascinated about their own culture, and that's kind of the aim of my page.
Yes, yes, yes. That I guess I would have to I have to do a different podcast with all the stories that you have in store. It's just getting interesting. After listening to the story, Subhagi, so I believe all my life has been a lie. I so Sarah, though it's like I used to believe that history always stayed. History was as such, and we've been learning about it. But it is actually the history has been evolving, and
Yeah.
is being served to us in different shapes and sizes. And each time there's a different modification of the same.
Yeah, and my grade 10 teacher, history
Hmm.
teacher, and I always loved history. And
Hmm.
like on the first day of class, I remember she put his story.
Story, yes,
So and it's like, and she said, it is really, history is really the story, but it's the story of whoever wins. So
right.
it's and it's his story. It's never her story. So it's his story. So I always had that in the back of my mind, that it's never the story of, you hardly hear of the story of the oppressed. You
Right,
always hear the story of the ones that won the battle, right? And it's always through a men's lens. So I think,
right,
like, slowly times are changing, but I think, like, we need to share more of our stories, our interpretations, and our
right.
version of history. And I think that's
Yes,
what I'm trying to do.
yes.
History is, about his, like, usually males and ones that won the war, right?
Hmm.
And or their stories of victors. But I think what we need to see, and I think, lately we've seen more and more, but I think it's not enough. We need to share our stories, our heritage, our versions of things. And I think that's what, to me, that's what, when I say what am I passionate about, that's what it is. Whether it's in my profession or whether it's in my passion projects, I want to share my version of what, from based on my own personal experiences, right, and my people. And I think, so that's what I do through my page. What the Potte. I've also, with my friends, we've created a Tamil children's book called Amuda Loves to Read. And Amuda is a girl from Canada, like a little 5-year-old, and just her life story. So
Hmm.
kids here can also understand, what our stories are. And like, my son doesn't have enough books that represent him, so we have a story of a girl as well. So I think anything history just doesn't have to be about just history, but just sharing our stories, because eventually these things will become history. We will become history in our own ways, in our own families, right? So all of those things. And I encourage people, like, when I talk to, others, I always tell them, this is my way of saying my story,
Yes,
the story of my people. But all of us have our version of history, of our interpretation of things, and our own personal stories. So I think, like, all of us can share our own individual story, just like how you're doing it through your podcast, right? You're sharing your version of stories and sharing other people's, and together we're creating our own history and our own
true.
story. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. So when they say, like, again, when children don't realize that what is the importance of learning about your tradition, what is the importance of knowing about your heritage. So this is what it is, because at some point of life, they have this question in their mind that who am I? Even though we say that as a world we are one, but there's
Hmm.
something about you, about your tradition, that is making you unique, that is making you stand out of the crowd, right?
Hmm.
Be it it's in your genetics, it's in
Yeah.
your character. Even though you blend with the other society that you're living in, some part of you is still there. Isn't that true? So as you said, we might become history, but what matters is what we leave behind,
Exactly. Yeah,
right?
beautifully said. And I think with
Yes.
children, I think
Hmm.
often we think, we need to teach them this, or they need to be proud of our heritage, they need to be proud of our, but that's not true. Like I mean, according to me, I think the more we push them that way, the more
Yes.
that they don't want to be. And I think it's more of just giving them as much experience and exposure to those things. Like
Yes.
my as a child, you know, growing up in a country, like a different country, I think what fascinated me was more of the experiences that I had. You know, the shows that I went to, like me being engaged in more cultural, like in dance and drama, was more, it made me be more aware of our traditions and then question it,
Yes.
versus if my mom just kept saying, no, like you got to do this, you got to do that. I don't think I would have really got into it. So with my son, you know, we try to speak in Tamil at home as well, just to give him that exposure. But at the same time, I think like what I want to do more of is give him that experiences where he can question it and ask us why we do things, right?
Right.
So the minute that we get the kids to question themselves and invoke interest, then they'll do it on their own. And I think it's a challenge. Like I'm saying this, but as a parent, you know, it's challenging for me to like keep doing things that evoke his interest.
Right.
But I think that's what it is. It's like just letting them, and for my readers as well. A lot of my readers are, my viewers are all people that grew up in the diaspora or have no understanding of their own culture. But when they read it, they're like, oh, you know, I've been asking my parents this question, but nobody knows. But they keep telling me that, you know, I should be proud to be Tamil. I should follow these things. And then I get frustrated. So now that I know the answer, then okay, like now I'm more interested into learning more. So I think that's, yeah, that's another thing I would say.
That's true. That's true. So yes, we can. All we can do is we can keep practicing. We cannot impose, but that needs to be put out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. So yes, let's have a little bit of this. This might sound a little bit funny, but there have been a lot of traditions that our ancestors follow, and we have messed up a lot on the same. So as you said, we never had fire in our weddings, right? So, but now
Yes.
if you see, we have tried. Even I've seen. Yeah, I got married in 2012. Things have changed a lot since then. People have started inculcating mehendi, haldi, all this, something that other people practice into Tamil weddings. I would say that this is a mess up, that people are finding ways to celebrate it better. Right? This is just an example. Since you're a researcher, since you're learning a lot about a culture, what do you see? Like, you cannot stand certain things, right? Oh my God, I know the truth. You know the truth. Even I'm like, okay, these things, I've seen them. Just like a common person. But you are a person who has seen something beyond. Like, really irks you. When do you feel like, oh my God, why are people messing it up so much?
I don't think people are messing it up too at all. Like I think, you know, to each its own. But I think the only concern I have is to make an informed decision, right? So so as I said, I conduct Tamil weddings now. So but I always tell the couple, so this year I just started it this year, and I conducted 2 weddings, and both the couple, and you know, I have after that I shared that on my page, and then a lot of people were curious on how do you conduct your weddings, and then I get so many inquiries. And I always tell them, you know, this is such a sensitive thing, because this is what, even if you're okay with it, and this is the funny part, right? Like parents who say, you know, you should follow traditions, you should know Tamil, they are afraid to actually bring in, you know, ancient Tamil traditions into weddings. So the problem now, not problem, but the concern is not the kids at the moment. It's actually the parents who are so used to one way of doing things. And it's not their fault, because that's what they've been taught years and years and years and years. So my concern is not people incorporating other things. My concern is, like, I want them to be able to also have opportunities to learn about these things. And then, like, I actually recently spoke to an uncle who is very like much into Tamil culture, Tamil traditions. He's very into learning about Tamil history. And he was saying, he's like, yeah, like I understand what you're saying, but it's so hard for us, like, to be able to do it for my own son, because I'm so used to it, and I'm so afraid that, if I don't put the fire, if I don't put the thing, like, will something happen? Like, I'm so scared, because that's what we're used to. But the minute, like, when I did the weddings, up to the point that they've seen it, they were scared. The parents of the bride were scared. But when I conducted the wedding, they were really happy, because then they understood. Because the more you see something, the more you accept it. So I think for all of for our community, because they haven't seen it, they can't accept it. And that's what they're used to, and we're always stuck with what we're used to, right? We think it's right because it just feels right, because that's what we do. So I think what I would like to see is us have more discussions like this, where we talk about this, and more people being aware that there are other ways, and there was, like, how our ancestors actually practiced these rituals. And I think that's what it is. The more you see it, the more you hear it, the more you speak about it, it just becomes more normalized.
Right. So the movie, it's like the reason why people are really afraid is, I would say, it's all ignorance. We've been tuned in a way, like, if you don't do this, this is going to happen to you.
Yeah. And that's
right?
what
we always get the results first.
Yeah. Like, I've been always told, like, if you're vegetarian, like, if you're not vegetarian on, like, these viridams, then something bad's gonna happen to you. So, like, that's what we've been taught, right? And that's how, like, these things spread. So when these are 60-year-old adults, but for them, that's what they've been taught all their lives. So for them, they're afraid to do anything different from what they've been taught.
Yes. Start understanding the reason behind each and every practice that they have, we would stop being so scared. Because the reason is, our ancestors have been efficiently threatening us with the results that so the first thing that's coming, you will burn in hell.
Yeah.
So if you keep lying, if you lie, God will take out your eyes.
Yeah.
So it's been like that. We've been tuned in such a way. So it's like, knowing or unknowingly, it's like it's become a part of us. Like, we don't want to cross the lines.
Exactly.
So these are imaginary lines. These are the lines that we have put for ourselves, but we would never risk crossing that. Yes. So Supanki, all this time you've been talking about Tamil tradition. You've been talking about the how Tamilians have been, how Tamilians are now, and what our understanding is. So with that, I will come to the concluding question. I would request you to talk a few lines in Tamil by putting out this question, in which, for example, I learned about this saying recently. ஆத்துல போட்டாலும் அளந்து போடும். So that I was understanding, like, even if you're throwing something in the river, you need to measure it before. Like, you just cannot throw away things. But later I studied, and I understood that whatever you learn, whatever you put inside you, this is something that you are doing. Whatever you learn, analyze it, understand it, and only then imbibe it within you. But this is what, in due course, what our ancestors said and what we are saying, the way we are saying, has totally entire different meaning. We would like to listen a few from you.
என்னை பொறுத்த வரைக்கும் இப்ப நாங்கள் என்ன படிக்கிறோமோ, இப்ப எங்கட தமிழ் சமுதாயத்துல வந்து இப்ப எங்கட கலாச்சாரமோ எங்கட பண்பாடோ 1000 வருடங்களுக்கு முன்னாலேயே எங்கட முன்னோர்கள் எங்களுக்கு தந்திருக்கணும். நிறைய விடயங்களை தந்திருக்கணும். எங்கட வரலாறை பார்த்தா எங்களுக்கு இன்றைக்கு வியப்பா இருக்கும். ஆனா அந்த வரலாற்றை வந்து நீங்க உங்களுக்கு முதல் அதை படிச்சு, எல்லா விதமாகவும் அதை படிச்சு, அதை உங்களுக்கு அதை உள்வாங்கி கொண்டு பிறகு அதை எவ்வளவு தூரம் நாங்க மற்றாக்களுக்கு சொல்லிக் கொடுக்க முடியுமோ அதுவும் சொல்லிக் கொடுக்கலாம். இது சரி அது சரி என்றும் இல்லை. இப்ப நான் சொல்றது எல்லாம் சரி என்று நான் சொல்ல மாட்டேன். அது என்ன பொறுத்த வரைக்கும் அது சரி, உங்களை பொறுத்த வரைக்கும் அது பிழையாவும் இருக்கலாம். ஆனா நாங்கள் அதை பற்றி கதைக்கணும். எங்கட சமுதாயத்தின் பிரச்சனை என்னென்னா, நாங்கள் எங்கட வரலாற்றையே நாங்கள் படிக்கிறேன், அதான் பிரச்சனை. நாங்க படிக்காமையே ஓகே இப்படித்தான் இருந்தது அப்படியே நாங்க கொண்டு போவோம் என்று நினைக்கிற மொழிய, நாங்களோட வரலாற்றை நாங்க எவ்வளவு படிக்கிறோமோ அந்த படிச்ச பிறகு எங்களுக்கே ஒரு தெளிவு வரும். அது நாங்க மற்றாக்களுக்கு சொல்லி கொடுக்கலாம். அதுக்கு பிறகு நாங்க படிக்காம நாங்க இப்படித்தான் மாற்றமே இருக்கக்கூடாதுன்னு நினைச்சோம்டா, தமிழ் ஏன் இவ்வளவு வருடத்துக்கு பிறகும் உலகம் முழுக்க தமிழ் எப்படி வளர்ந்து கொண்டிருக்குன்னு நாங்க பார்த்தோம்னா அது மாற்றத்தின் அடிப்படையில தான். இப்ப தமிழ் எழுத்துக்களை பார்த்தாலே எவ்வளவோ விதமா மாறித்தான் இப்ப இந்த எழுத்துக்கள் இப்ப இருக்குது. அப்ப அந்த மாற்றம் ஒன்றுதான் தமிழை வளர்த்தது. அப்ப ஆனா அதனால நாங்க மாற்றத்தை பார்த்து பயப்படக்கூடாது. ஆனா எங்களோட வரலாற்றை படிச்சுட்டு நாங்கள் அந்த மாற்றத்தை கொண்டு வரணும்ன்றதான் நான் சொல்லுவேன்.
Lovely. ரொம்ப அழகா பேசுனீங்க சுபாங்கி. That was lovely listening from you. So yes, so it was a lovely conversation with you. I just like, it was like this was happening with me. அகத்தில போட்டாலும் ஒண்ணுன்னா ரொம்ப whatever points you gave was really valuable, and I'm very sure that the viewers and the listeners of my podcast would love listening to you, because you have given them a light, you have given them a spark, you've given them the light that we get at the end of the tunnel. That yes.
Thank you. It's very kind of you to say that.
So I would proudly say that you indeed did that. So thank you so much for taking your time and being here in my podcast today. Thank you very much. It was lovely talking to you.
And thank you for doing what you're doing, and gathering so many people from various fields, various interests, and really putting out their stories to others. And I think what you're doing is absolutely amazing. I hope you keep doing what you're doing, and I'm looking forward to learning about so many different topics apart from mine. So keep going.
Thank you very much, Supanki.
Well, it was a great episode in which we could learn and where to start about knowing your history, what to know and what not to do when you're talking about your culture or tradition. It was great to know a lovely person like Supanki. And also, I could learn that there are so many more things that you can do apart from what you are doing. That is, to follow your passion. I just love talking to Supanki. I know you would have also enjoyed this episode. To let me know how you felt about today's episode, send me an email to wominspiria@gmail.com. The spelling goes by WOMINSPIRIA@gmail.com. Wominspiria pages can be found in LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. You can watch the entire video of the interview in YouTube now. So, until next time, keep inspiring and look for inspiration everywhere possible. This is Revati signing off from Wominspiria, contagiously inspiring. Thank you very much.